ahead and start our lesson. We don't have everyone with us right now, but they can join when they are able to. Okay, so have a look at our Zoom rules. They are the same as always. Can you go ahead and read them out for me, Katie? All right, let's go ahead and have a look at our homework from yesterday. So lots and lots and lots of grammar on our first day back. Write complex if the sentence has an independent clause and one or more dependent clauses. Write dependent clause if the sentence does not tell a complete thought. Number 1, when the boat's rope broke, the boys worked quickly to fix it. What do we think? Is this a dependent clause that doesn't make sense, or is it complex sentence with an independent clause and a dependent clause? Rosie, what do you think?
I think it is a complex sentence.
Correct, well done. It is a complex sentence. We have a dependent and an independent clause, and it makes sense. It tells a full and complete thought. Underline the dependent clause. Write the subordinating conjunction that begins the dependent clause. Number 1, we will see the dolphins before we leave. What is my dependent clause here? Katie, what should we have underlined?
We should underline before we leave.
So we should underline we leave because before is our subordinating conjunction that begins the dependent clause. So we leave is what we're looking for, before we leave. Good job, Katie. Okay, last one. Combine the clauses to form complex sentences. So here we had to combine these sentences. Sometimes we needed to use a comma, sometimes we didn't. Let's have a look here. Who can tell me what should this sentence say? If there should be a comma in it, please use the word comma. Can you please do this one for me, Pat?
Rover is Lucy's best friend, comma, even though he is a dog.
So not quite. So you didn't need to change them around. You could have kept it the same. So we could have had here, even though he is a dog, comma, Rover is Lucy's best friend. We needed the comma here because we have to put a comma when we start our sentence with our subordinating conjunction. Even though he is a dog, comma, Rover is Lucy's best friend. Okay, let's look at number 2. Okay, guys, moving on to our lesson. So today we are doing fictional narrative writing. Woohoo! So what is fictional narrative writing? So fictional narrative writing is basically fictional story writing. Narrative writing just means writing a story. And if we're writing a fictional narrative, that means that we're writing about something that's imagined, that's not real, something like Harry Potter. Let's have a look. What makes a great fictional narrative? This is what we need. This is the recipe for a great fictional narrative. A beginning, a middle, and end. The beginning tells the characters and the setting and hints at the problem. In the middle, we find out how the characters try to solve the problem, and we have what we call the climax. At the end, that's when we have the resolution and how the characters solve the problem. The characters' feelings get the readers involved. So when you're reading a story, if the character is feeling sad or scared or anxious or down or happy, depending on how good the author is, you should be feeding off their feeling too. And that's what engages you in the story. In the middle, events are told in a logical sequence. Time order words are used to show the order of events. Again, vivid details and dialogue paint a clear picture for readers. So we always need to make sure that we're using very vivid details and we're using lots and lots of adjectives in our writing. As we also know, dialogue really helps create a story. So we had a lesson not so long ago where we had some acting, where I asked some of you to put on silly voices and say and speak the dialogue. What we learned from that lesson is that we don't need to say, they were running away, they were very scared. Instead, we can use dialogue to make it exciting. Run for your life, it's going to fall. So when we use dialogue, it's much more exciting than just the author constantly saying they were running away, they were feeling scared. So it's important for us to include dialogue in our story writing to make sure it's really great. And as always, the ending resolves the problem and provides a sense of closure. Sometimes we talk about having cliffhanger endings, which can be great, but for this particular story, which we're going to be writing over a couple of weeks, I want to make sure that there is a sense of closure. So for this time, I don't want any cliffhanger endings. I want a proper sense of closure. Let's have a look. Let's have a look at this example. So the prompt is write a fictional narrative about characters who survive a natural disaster. Okay, so we have a clear beginning that sets the scene. One day, Caroline and her parents were watching the weather reports on TV. So automatically, I know this story is about Caroline and her mom and dad, and that there is a hurricane heading towards them. So I'm a little bit worried. I'm also a bit interested because I want to know what's going to happen. Then it moves on and we find out some of the characters' feelings. Caroline's worried. What if the power goes out? What if we can't cook? What if there are no lights? What are they going to do? So here, again, it's engaging me. Caroline's feeling worried, and therefore I'm feeling a little worried too. So if you'll notice here in the middle, we have lots of transition words. That night, at first, later, and finally. So in the middle, that's when we're going to be using the majority of our transition words to help the reader understand in which sequence our events happened. So far we've got a great beginning. We've got lots of characters' feelings which are engaging me in the story. Because Caroline is so worried about this, I want to keep reading to find out what happens because I'm feeling a little worried too. Then, in the middle, we're reaching towards that climax. Caroline is laid awake in bed, listening for the storm. I've got lots of vivid details here. It says the wind gently rustled the leaves. So when I read that sentence, I can imagine a gentle rustle of the leaves. That's nothing to be afraid of. But later, the branches scratched against her window like fingernails on a chalkboard. Here I've got a really great simile. The branches are scratching against the window like fingernails on chalkboard. If you've ever heard someone drag their
It burns my
fingernails,
ears.
thank you. Yes, Pat, it does. If you've ever heard someone drag their fingernails on a chalkboard, it makes you squirm. It's a horrible feeling and a horrible sensation. So when I read this sentence, I'm imagining a horrible sound scratching on the window. So this is really good, vivid details. And then finally, thankfully, Caroline gets to sleep even though she's feeling quite scared. Let's keep reading and find out what happens. Here we've got more vivid details. By morning, the wind was howling. Here is some personification. Wind does not howl, but sometimes it makes a howling sound. So that's really vivid again. I'm imagining the wind screaming and howling in the morning. I can imagine the trees bending back and forth as this hurricane is approaching this family. Here we have some vivid detail. Sorry, here we have some dialogue. I can't see a thing, Caroline said. What are we going to do now? Instead of the author saying, Caroline couldn't see anything, she was worried. They're showing me by using dialogue instead of telling me. Okay, so at the end, in the middle, we can see that it's coming to a bit of a climax. Caroline is really scared as the power goes out. They can't see anything. Caroline is really worried. She's getting really afraid. But towards the end, her dad is calming her down. Don't worry. Even though the lights are out, we'll make it into a fun day. And they're lighting candles, they're playing flashlight tag, they're setting up a tent in their house. They're just making the best out of a bad situation. And finally, in the end, we have that sense of closure. Before long, the rain stopped, lights come back on, But instead of the family being happy with that, Caroline's actually saying, hey, can we turn the lights back out and keep doing what we were doing, because we were actually having so much fun. So I read this and I've come to a sense of closure. No one got hurt. Everyone survived the natural disaster, and really they were having a great time. So this is a really, really great example of a fictional narrative about characters who survive a natural disaster. Our prompt is this prompt. We're going to write a fictional narrative about characters who survive a natural disaster. Now, I'm going to lower all hands. What is a natural disaster? Thailand, what is a natural disaster? Thailand A.
A natural disaster is like tornado, volcano eruption,
Yeah.
tsunami.
A tsunami. Very good. Well done. So basically, natural disasters are kind of like freak weather accidents. So really extreme weather that can cause serious devastation and destruction. Have a look at some of these examples. Well done to you guys who are answering in the chat box, like Steve. Well done. Tornado, tsunami, volcano eruption. Han, sorry, you told me your camera is broken. That's fine. So some examples of natural disasters are volcanic eruptions. So maybe you want to write a story about people who survive a volcanic eruption, kind of like Dog of the Sea Waves and the brothers who survived the volcanic eruption there. Maybe you want to write a story about a landslide. So a landslide is when there is too much stress on a mountain and lots of rocks come tumbling down. Maybe you want to write about a tornado. There are lots of disaster movies all about tornadoes. Maybe you could get inspiration from a movie. Maybe you want to write about a hurricane. So a hurricane is a huge tropical storm. So it's a very, very high winds, really heavy rain, such high winds that you can knock down trees. It causes car accidents. We could also have an avalanche if you want to make your setting somewhere snowy. So an avalanche is when there is too much stress of weight on a snowy mountain, and that snow, it cracks and crumbles and falls down. We can also have wildfires. So wildfires occur when a forest is too dry, and because of climate change, the weather is far too hot. And because it's so hot without any water, the bark becomes very, very, very hot, and wildfires can start with the intense sun, and they can be extremely devastating. I'm sure that you remember at the beginning of 2020, America was having a lot of problems with lots of wildfires, and same with Australia too. We could also have floods. Now, floods are something that hit quite close to home here in Vietnam, especially in central Vietnam. During monsoon season, farmers particularly are really hit very hard with floods, and it can destroy crops, it can destroy houses, it can even destroy roads. Maybe you want to write about a drought. So a drought is the opposite of a flood. A drought is when we don't have rain for a very, 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 very long time. We just have sun. And as you can see, it gets so dry that the ground starts to crack and all the plants begin to die. And if there are no plants to eat, the farmers cannot produce crops to eat or sell, and therefore the animals also have nothing to eat. So all of these natural disasters can happen, and they can be really, really severe. And finally, we have a tsunami, which is when there is an earthquake under the ground that can cause giant waves to come crashing down and destroy areas around it. And finally, an earthquake. So guys, you can choose whatever kind of natural disaster you want to. It's up to you. I want you to use your imagination. One thing I want you to remember when you're writing is to make sure to use vivid details. This is something that with time and practice, I actually feel like we have gotten a lot better at. I want you to expand your ideas by including vivid details. So don't just say, there was a bad earthquake. Use vivid words. The earth shuddered as the ground cracked open. Remember, you're writing a story. Think about what you would want to read as a young reader for me. So when you're writing this story for me, you're trying to engage me. You're trying to make this exciting. Vivid details are great because they help the reader picture exactly what is happening. They make your writing sound more interesting and more exciting. For example, in Dog of the Sea Waves, the author did not write this. Pro, read it for me.
They jumped off the boat. Manus went under the water.
Yawn, boring, awful. They did not write that because if they did write those sentences, they would have never got their book published. The boys jumped off the boat. Manu went under the water. Oh no, it's very monotone, it's very boring. However, the author did write this instead. Pro, can you read it for me?
The earth shuddered, and the five brothers jumped. In an instant, he was gone.
Why is the second sentence better than the first sentence?
I think because the author used a lot of vivid words.
Good job. And why does that make you more interested?
Because it gives me the feeling and helps me paint a picture of the scene that is happening in my head.
Exactly. That's a really perfect answer. Well done, Lily. The second sentence is much better because it helps me imagine the picture in my head. The earth shuddered and the five brothers jumped. Then I have a very dramatic pause. ... In an instant, he was gone. Who was gone? I don't know who they're talking about. I'm scared. I'm nervous. Is it Manu? Is it one of the other brothers? This is engaging. This is captivating me and making me want to read more. Trixie, can you read this for me? The author's
sentences are more interesting and exciting because they give a clear picture of what happened to the brothers after the volcano erupted and of how events looked and how the characters felt.
So this is pretty much solidifying what Lily just said. The author's sentences are better because they're more exciting and interesting. They give us a clear picture of what happened to the brothers after the volcano erupted, and it lets us know how the picture looked and kind of how the characters felt. They jumped, and in an instant, he was gone. It's creating that sense of drama that you always want when you're reading a story. Have a look here. Look at this boring and detailless sentence. Kimmy, read it for me.
Sarah spotted an animal at the side of the road.
Okay, now this sentence, again, fine, it makes sense, it's grammatically correct, but we have no details here. Is it a big animal? What color is it? This is a boring sentence. Instead, I could just throw in a couple more words here and maybe some action words and make this sentence. Hacker, can you read the sentence I asked you, Noob, to read, please?
Sarah spotted a huge brown animal trying to hide behind a tree at the side of the road.
Good job. Now, this sentence is much better. I've got adjectives, huge and brown. So that kind of gives me a clue as to what animal I'm thinking of. Maybe it could be a moose, maybe it could be a bear. But when we read this one, Sarah spotted an animal. Well, what kind of animal? Is it a frog? Was it small? Was it big like a moose? Was it gray like an elephant? It's so vague that it's too hard to paint a picture. Whereas when you say, Sarah spotted a huge brown animal trying to hide behind a tree at the side of the road, it helps you paint a picture. Maybe it's a bear. Maybe it could be a deer. Who knows? But at least we can paint that picture in our head. Next, read this for me, Steve.
His bedroom was messy.
Okay, his bedroom was messy. Now, again, the sentence is grammatically correct. It makes sense, but it's kind of a boring sentence. It's what I like to call a first grader sentence. Now, with us being in fifth grade, we need to make sure that our sentences are much more exciting and have many more details. Have a look at my sentence. Read this for me, please, Ben.
Piles of dirty clothes covered everything in his bedroom.
Okay, lovely. Now, who can explain to me why this second sentence is better? So the second sentence is showing us just quite how messy his bedroom is. This says his bedroom was messy. This could mean that his bed was unmade and maybe he had a book or two lying around his bedroom. Whereas this sentence is explaining just how messy his bedroom is. Piles of dirty clothes covered everything in his bedroom. Ew. Now, when I read this sentence, this is what I imagine. I imagine a sad person sitting on top of lots and lots and lots of dirty laundry covered all around their bedroom. It's really important that we make sure we add lots of details into our writing to make it more exciting for our reader. Okay, last but not least, planning a fictional narrative. So for homework today, you are not going to write a story. You're actually just going to put a lot of time and effort into making a plan for your story so that next week, when we go to write our story, you have a beautiful, really well thought out plan to help you. A good plot introduces the characters, setting, and hints at the problem at the beginning of the story. In the middle of the story, we find out how the characters try to solve the problem, and usually the problem intensifies. It gets really, really bad in the middle. In the end, we find out how the problem is solved or how it works out. Readers like a resolution that provides closure from answering all the questions that they had at the beginning. So no cliffhangers for this story. Let's have a look. Here is no resolution. Manu was still missing under the water. If this is how our story ended, we wouldn't really be that satisfied. It's not a very good ending. It doesn't let us know, is he okay under the water? Has he grown a magical tail and turned into a seal himself? I don't know. There's no resolution. There's no closure. There's no answers to my questions. That's why instead, the author wrote this. Dog of the sea waves carried Manu to the surface as his brothers ran to embrace him. This is a much better ending. This ending is better because it tells how the problem worked out and what happens to the characters. So then finally, I can close my book, give it a round of applause, and I feel happy about the story that I've read. So please make sure that your resolution makes sense. So often I've read your stories and been blown away by the beginning and the middle, but then at the end, it seems like sometimes you just get a bit tired of writing and say, and then someone knocked on the door and we don't know what happened. To be continued. Please don't do that. Please really seriously think about how you want to end this story about people surviving a natural disaster. For homework today, have a look. You are going to use this graphic organizer. You are going to use this graphic organizer to write a fictional narrative about characters who survive a natural disaster. You can choose whatever you would like. I'm going to show you my plan as an example of what I would like you to do for homework. So
No
for
copying.
me, no copying, exactly. If I see any copying, I will be very upset. You guys are young and creative and have wonderful, vivid imaginations. So I want your stories to be much better than mine. Have a look. My setting is the ocean during a fierce storm aboard a boat looking for sunken treasure. The deck on the boat is covered with treasure that they have already found. My characters are Stella, who is the captain of the boat, Josh, who is Stella's 8-year-old son, and Professor Schmidt, an expert on sunken ships. Now, in the beginning of my story, I'm going to introduce the characters, the setting, and give a hint of the problem. So, giant waves are threatening to sink the boat. Josh is terrified because he has never been to sea before and he thinks that everyone on the boat is going to drown. So I'm starting to reel you in with my story here. In the middle, something is going to go terribly wrong. I'll show you what it is. In the middle, a huge wave crashes into the boat and washes some of the already found treasure into the sea. The professor and the crew are running around frantically trying to save the remaining pieces. In the end, Josh goes below the deck. He helps the professor and the crew put the leftover treasure away safely. Josh is so busy helping, he actually forgets about the horrific storm outside and he feels a bit better. Thankfully, in the end, Stella, the captain, is able to navigate them safely out of the storm. Now, this is not my story. This is just the plan. So it took me quite a while to come up with this, actually. It took me about 20 minutes because I was thinking of other ideas that aren't in here that I will add to my story. So this is what I want you to do for homework. I want you to spend about 20 to 30 minutes coming up with a story about characters who survive a terrible storm, a tsunami, an avalanche, a volcanic eruption. It's up to you. I want you to make sure that you write down your setting. Now, please make sure your setting, it doesn't say a house in a field. As you can see how detailed my setting is. My setting is the ocean during a fierce storm aboard a boat looking for sunken treasure. The more effort you put into this plan today, the easier it will be next week when we have to write a full story. So next week, we're not writing a paragraph, we're not writing an essay, we're writing a full-fledged story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. So please make sure that tonight you take this really seriously, take time and effort, use the internet, maybe do some research on natural disasters. You can use inspiration from real life stories if you want to, and come up with an amazing plan for a great story that's going to blow my socks off. Do I have any questions about what I want you to do for homework? Please raise your
No.
hand now. Okay, my little writers and authors in the making, that's all we have time for today. So please make sure that you print out this graphic organizer, because I've sent it to Miss Ling, who has sent it to your parents. Print it out, or if you don't have a printer, you can simply draw it out. Take a picture, upload it to Google Drive so I can have a look, and tomorrow morning I will pick the best plans to show to the class. Since there are no questions, that's all we have time for today. Really good job today, guys. Can't wait to read your plans. Make sure they're exciting, and have a wonderful day. Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.